Hi everyone. So continue our conversation about how to gather data from the web. Last week we looked at application programming interfaces, or APIs, which are a really great way to retrieve structured information from the web if an API is available for the data source you're looking for or looking at. And so while APIs are great for getting data from social media, there are some other great data APIs out there. Obviously, there are many times when we find information that might technically be in a structured format or more or less structured format, but it isn't available through an API. And that's, of course, where web scraping comes in. So this week what we're going to look at is how to do web scraping, a basic example. And so what I'm going to look at for this is NYPD crime statistics. So there are a bunch of different ways that you can access crime statistics. And one of them is to just look at the borough and precinct crime statistics. And so what you can see here is that there's quite a lot of data. Every precinct is represented individually in its own PDF and Excel files. Now, obviously, if we're doing data analysis, we will prefer the Excel files. We'll get to that. But it would be obviously prohibitive to try to download all of these individually. So this is a pretty common scraping situation. Most often what we're going to do when we need to scrape something is we're going to find the URL, sometimes download a copy of it, isolate some element of the page on the basis of its contents, whether it's because it contains another link that we want to use or it contains the data that we're looking for itself, and then we're going to write that out into a structured format. So for starters, we're just going to look at how we can use the requests library, which we saw last week, and BeautifulSoup, which is a Python library available for both Python 2 and 3. We'll be working in Python 3 to just get at the structure, to basically dig into the structure of this page and get the data that we need out of it. So first things first, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. So I'm going to create my blank file, and the first thing that I'm going to import two libraries right off the bat. So first of all, I know I'm going to need requests because of course I'm dealing with web requests here. I'm also going to import the BeautifulSoup library from its package, and in just a second we will look at the documentation for that. So BeautifulSoup has been around for many years. It's a really great library. It's pretty much the go-to when it comes to web scraping. And the documentation is pretty exhaustive. And so we'll come back to the documentation when we actually get to that part. The main thing that we need now is to target the URL that we're looking for. In this case, I should point out that there actually is an HTTPS version of this page, and of course we prefer that if we can get it. It's obviously not authenticated; it doesn't have extended verification on it, but we have some increased confidence that it hasn't been manipulated in the course of our connection. So in any case, I'm going to come here and say, okay, first I'm going to create my target URL. And then I'm going to say, so what I like to do when I'm doing this kind of work is I actually prefer to save a local copy of the page that I'm working on. Any number of reasons why I might want to do this. First and foremost, I might want to work offline. So very often web scraping is a pretty big matter of trial and error because you're sort of narrowing in on within what's often kind of a messy and complex HTML structure, you're narrowing in on the specific characteristics that define the data that you're looking for within that page. So big reason to do that is just that you can work offline. If you're going to be traveling or something like that, you don't need to have access to the internet or consistent access to the internet. It also helps deal with any potential proxies or firewalls that you might encounter if you're on the road. The other reason is, of course, that we don't want to end up getting rate limited for any reason. So, if you have a script and you're kind of testing it, you might be running it every minute or two, and you don't want that activity to raise a red flag on the web host's side that something perhaps that they don't like is going on, right? So this just gives us more flexibility. It also, again, is another way to ensure that we're dealing with the same contents each time. So depending on how frequently the web page that you're looking at updates, it's good to keep a record. You'll have a local record of the date, at least the date, if not the date and time at which you downloaded that particular page. So for all of these reasons, I'm going to create a local copy. And to do that, actually, I'm just going to start with, page contents, and I'm just going to say requests, and this is obviously a GET request, and I can put in target URL. And then the page data in this case is going to be just the text contents of that page. I think that's correct. Hang on a second. Yes. So that's our page data. So I'm going to save a local copy of this. So I'm going to say local copy. I create a new file, and I'm going to call this NYPD stats. NYPD crime. Actually, I'm going to use let's see, underscores. Jan 2717. Just Jan 27 is fine. And I'm going to save it with an HTML extension because it is in fact an HTML page, despite the fact that it ends with this page ending here. And obviously I want this to be a writable file because I'm going to write the contents to it, and indeed that's all I need to do. I'm just going to say write page data, and then I'm going to close it. Okay, so this is just me. Oops. Okay, and so if I run this in terminal, let's see. Oops. Yes. Okay. So I can just run this here, and with any luck, whoops, oh, typo, try that again. I just want to note here that I actually have purchased Sublime Text, but I did it on a different operating system, so I need to give them my key. I recommend that you pay for the software you use, even if not absolutely required. Okay, so Python, we know no news is good news. I'm going to check my folder location and hopefully bring up, whoa, that is way more stuff than I wanted. Okay, bring up this folder, and we can see that I have the HTML file here. Now, again, how you want to go about figuring out the contents of this, you could just kind of scroll through if you wanted. This is where I actually find that obviously Chrome Web Tools are really useful, so I can inspect the page and go directly to the area that I'm looking at and get a feel for what it contains. So here I can see that when I have this selected, I've got pretty much everything. If I wanted to be more particular, I can jump down and I see that I have in span 6, I have Manhattan South. I could double check and make sure that I have that each one of them has a class of span 6. So the interesting thing here is that I actually have two kind of sets of contents, or two ways that I can target this. I can kind of go for everything at once, or I can go for them in a more incremental way. What I can do, so probably what I'm going to do is I'm just going to target the top level, this top level span 6. So this is actually iterated from a previous time that I tried this, and I ended up targeting span 6, and I got duplicates of everything, right? So it's just to say that, as I said before, that web scraping is involves a lot of trial and error. So in this case, you know, as with anything, what I want to try and do is identify what is unique about this piece that I'm targeting, right? So about description as a class name seems like there might only be one on the page. Handily, I can swap over to my local copy and I can confirm that, right? So this is the only thing that has the class of about description on this entire page, which is great, right? I always want to be able, if I can go straight for something that's unique about my data, that's always going to be to my advantage. So I'm going to brew the soup. Okay, so Beautiful Soup is really straightforward to use. All I have to do is say, I'm going to call this souped up. And again, I'm going to work with my local copy of the file here. So I'm going to open this. I can just copy this command basically and make sure that I use it as readable rather than writable, right? So I can open that. So that's my target file, is my local copy. And then I need to provide a second argument here, which in this case is HTML parser. So this is just confirming for Beautiful Soup. I might want to actually include the Beautiful Soup command here. Let's try that. Okay. I want to confirm for Beautiful Soup here that what I'm parsing is in fact HTML. And then what am I looking for? Well, what I'm looking for is actually just any div that has the class about hyphen description, right? So if I again flip back here, what I can see is that this is a div. Now, the nice thing about Beautiful Soup is that if I search for a class, it's going to just search for any instance of that particular class. So, well, I guess you could say it cuts both ways. But in this case, it's handy, so it doesn't matter that it has both the class of span 6 and the class of about description. Because it has about description, I can search just for that, and that's what will come back. In doing this, there's a very straightforward find. So I'm going to call this data span or data div. I'm going to just take my parsed version, and I'm just going to say find. And what I'm looking for is a div. Now, class. Makes sense that I would be able to search by class, but of course class is a reserved word in Python. So this is where I need to come back to my documentation and figure out what to do with that. So in scanning down the left sidebar here, we sort of get through a lot of things, but somewhere is, let's see if it's close to the top. Ugh, I hate it when that happens. Okay, so let's look for class. No, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. This is probably yes. Okay, searching by CSS class, right? So totally stands to reason this is a very frequent thing that people are going to want to do, that there is a means for handling the fact that Beautiful Soup being a Python library, class is a reserved word. And what we can see is that they've simply just added an underscore to that parameter to avoid the class conflict in Python. So I'm going to say class underscore, and in this case, I'm just going to go with about description. Okay? And if I want to just check, right, I always like to kind of, really test as I go here and make sure that I'm getting what I think I should be getting. And so from here, I will just go ahead, and I could actually, just to point out, right, I could now actually comment out the first segment of this. I'm not going to bother right now, but again, the fact that I would, obviously if I went offline, I would want to do that because I don't want to be trying to request this page if I am not online. Okay, so, oops, looks like I have a syntax error in here somewhere. Just one second. Right, I might want to put an equal sign there. Little details, folks, little details. Okay, let's try it again. And now, again, just checking that I've got what I expected. So here it looks pretty good. If I just eyeball this, it actually lays out reasonably well. I can see that I see the Bronx at the top. I see Queens North, Queens South. I'm reasonably confident that I've got everything that I'm looking for here. So when we come back, what we'll be looking at is simply how do we drill down to the actual contents of the links. And then we'll use a quick regular expression so that we can filter out just those Excel files. And we can just write them to a file, and then again, we would probably have a second script that would actually go through and download those files, and then et cetera, right? So first things first, we're back in a moment to look at how to target the contents of those links and filter them by data type. All right, see you in a moment.